I found a true hidden gem classic BMW. I bought this BMW E30 318i and brought her home. She cleaned up beautifully, and last episode we got her running. Link is in the description if you missed it. This car has 65,000 original miles, and it shows. In this episode, I'm inspecting the entire car, getting a list, checking compression, and smoking the engine. Let's get started. It's inspection day. So it's time to figure out what this car needs. I figure we'll start in the engine bay, get this taken care of, then we can get it up in the air, get up underneath, and check out the rest. The battery is fresh. I would like to pull it out again and check the condition of the battery tray. One of you guys said that was a common area. Whenever I'm checking these valve covers, I like to use this mirror here and just get underneath that valve cover gasket seam. The entirety of the valve cover looks pretty good with the exception of this little front corner. However, this front corner is where the timing cover meets, and it does look like it could be old oil residue, so I would pressure wash this off first and see if that valve cover gasket is something we need to do. It looks like we have some dried coolant crust on this heater hose T down here. We'll see if it's leaking when I put pressure into the cooling system, but I'm definitely going to note it. As far as engine mount condition, I'm hoping we'll get a better look from underneath, and eventually I will pop the cap off the distributor so we can take a look at the rotor and cap. This engine has 3 belts. I did not know that. It's all just a standard V-style belt. They don't look cracked, but I figure we'll replace them just to play it safe. They do look pretty tired. The water pump does look dry. Seeing no signs of coolant on the water pump. The weep hole is nice and clean. Now the fan clutch, I checked the backside with a mirror and I'm not seeing any fluid leaking out of the fan clutch, so I'm going to leave it for now. And once we get this thing driving back on the highway again, we'll see how well the cooling system works. The coolant is actually a really good color. It's like a nice dark evergreen. We'll flush it just due to the age, but it is really nice to see that it has good color. I wonder if I have a cooling system adapter that'll fit onto this radiator. I assume this here is fuel pressure regulator. Maybe this looks to be an inline fuel filter. Vacuum hose on this looks really old and tired, so we'll have to refresh that as well. Engine oil we checked last episode, but it's surprisingly clean and up to level, which is good. We're still going to be replacing it due to age. There's a look at the power steering fluid. It's not terrible. I've actually seen newer cars with a lot worse looking fluid. We'll still flush it and replace the reservoir, but it actually looks in good condition. Let's check brake fluid. Brake fluid is showing 3% moisture content. Not terrible, but definitely due for a brake flush. Nice excuse to use my brake fluid flush tool. One of you guys had recommended this brake booster line with this check valve, so I'm definitely going to put that on the list. These BMW vacuum check valves always seem to fail, and it'd just be a good idea to refresh it. Now it looks like the best way to check this air filter is to pull this air box completely out, so I think that's what we're going to do next. Looks like 2 10mm nuts there and hose clamp for the intake boot, which was already pretty loose. Should have been tighter than that. That's an interesting style connector. So we have another wire running here to the intake duct for the air cleaner. That must be like intake air temperature sensor. And then we got this little guy over here, which I'm not sure what he does. Let's see what this air filter looks like. Wow, it's actually decent. Doesn't look too dirty. Got a brand on here, Molly. That's cool. So yeah, someone did take really good care of this car. It's all really great stuff to see. Probably just going to reuse this air filter for now, but I definitely will put it on the list. Who knows how old this thing is. Well, we got loads more room now with that air box out, and surprisingly enough, all of these power steering hoses are dry. Suction hose from the bottle to the pump looks good. The pressure hose from the pump to the rack looks good. And then the return from the rack back up to the bottle. Everything looks really good, which is impressive because all the modern BMWs, they all leak there. And it looks like we got access to our oil filter now. Made in Austria. So someone was putting good quality components on this car. All good things to see. Looks like there's the oil filter housing right there, and I'm not seeing any signs of oil leaking down from there. So that's good news as well. I don't even think this thing needs an oil filter housing gasket. I'd like to renew this fuse box cover. The clip down here is broken, and it doesn't look like it's had any water intrusion, but it would be nice to renew that cover just so I know this thing safely latches. It has a little bit of a lift right there. Other than that, this side of the engine looks good. There's some fuel lines and some vacuum lines I need to make sense of, so I need to do some more research on schematics, get an idea what everything does and where it goes. But other than that, this end of the car looks really clean, and I'm actually really surprised at the condition of this thing so far. Pretty cool to see this style thermostat. You never really see them in line. They're usually always mounted to the cylinder head. But we do have this junction right here where this upper and lower radiator hose do tie into, and it does look like this lower radiator hose has some coolant crust where it mates up to that surface. There's also 3 different switches in here. Looks like 2 temperature sensors and something else. There's a little bit of crust present on these as well, so it would be nice just to sort of go through this entire unit. Definitely need to at least reseal these hoses. Maybe a good idea to replace this hose, but fresh hose clamps, clean it up with some wire wheels or a wire brush, get all this fixed up. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe there's coolant flowing to this throttle body. And there's a little hose connection here on the back. Maybe has the slightest amount of coolant crust on there, so I assume we'll probably have this intake manifold off at one point. If we do, we'll refresh that hose, or if I have the throttle body down for any reason. Now, before we check out the rest, let's throw some smoke into the intake. I think this thing has a vacuum leak causing the rough idle. Let's see if I'm correct. Start with the adapter. All right. Bust out the Ventus. We got instant smoke. Plug it in. Let's see what happens. That's all it takes. So it's definitely leaking from that distributor region. I think there's either a seal that allows that distributor to seal down into the cylinder head, or it looks like there's a bracket that the distributor goes into, and then it takes a 90, goes into the back of the cylinder head. Maybe that gasket has a tear in it, and that could be the cause as well. But just goes to show how valuable smoke machines are. I mean, I would have never in a million years thought to look at the distributor for a vacuum leak. I instantly started thinking about, oh, look at this terrible looking hose at the idle air controller. Look at this small little crack there. That's definitely going to be our culprit. But who would have thought? Vacuum leak at the distributor. I'm definitely going to be addressing these lines, even if we're not getting smoke showing. But I think if we do seal up the distributor, we'll probably have some leaks elsewhere once we have that major leak fixed up. But gotta love this little machine. Gotta love it. So I got up underneath here to get a better angle for you guys, and you can see it's pretty apparent. Smoke is just dumping out of that thing. It looks like there's a small little pinhole on the bottom of that distributor. I assume that's to allow crankcase pressure to leak out of the distributor if that distributor O-ring is starting to fail. That's my guess. Again, I have never had a car with a distributor before, so if any of you guys have some knowledge on this component here, I'd love to hear your input. I'm probably just going to order up any gaskets and O-rings I can find associated with that distributor, try to fix it up that way. Maybe we'll have a little bit better idea once we start tearing into it. All right, let's check trans fluid. All my other BMWs don't have a transmission dipstick. This is so nice to have a trans stick again. Ooh, that is nice. That is really clear. Smells like fresh fluid, doesn't smell burnt at all. Really nice, clear color. I don't even know if I have to service that. I probably will, just because I didn't do it myself, so it'll be nice to know that it's been done, but That is some really good looking transmission fluid. So this transmission had to have been replaced. Yeah, that is a great sign. That is really, really clean transmission fluid right there.
Say, do you want some?
All right, let's get this thing up in the air and see what the underside looks like. Before I lift the front end, let's get these wheels chalked. This car is so incredibly light. These 3-ton jack stands should work just fine for a car this little. All right, you guys ready to see how clean this thing is? Check this out. Look at that oil pan. Dry. Maybe a little bit of seepage up here in the top left corner, but that could just be coming from that front crank seal. Looks like we have a leak at that front crank seal. One of you guys said that the front crank seal and the rear main are probably leaking, and you nailed it. Luckily, they're not too difficult to do. Power steering pump looks pretty solid. Not seeing any seepage coming from there. This thing is so incredibly clean, I just can't believe it. That AC compressor is in great shape. There's a little bit of, must be part of a bushing on that bracket there for the AC compressor. Almost look like coolant crust. The engine mounts. Let's see, how can I get you guys a good angle? Kind of hard to get a gauge on that engine mount back there. We're going to refresh them anyways, but it's kind of hard to get a visual ID on there with the camera. That engine mount definitely looks worn. Not seeing any major tears in it, but it's probably such old rubber. It'll be nice to refresh them anyways. Looks like we have a leak at some transmission cooler lines here. Looks like the radiator has the trans cooler built in. And here we got our drain petcock. Wow, this radiator had 2 sensors in it. That's pretty advanced for 1984. And then maybe a little bit of seepage here at this trans cooler line connection over here on the driver's side frame rail. Now, I may have forgot to mention it in the last video, but this car actually had a transmission replacement. Denise said this automatic trans was replaced, I believe, at the dealership. So the pan looks nice and clean, and I should have no concerns with this automatic transmission. It would be nice to manual swap it, but it would also be a shame to get rid of such a clean and well operating trans. The rack and pinion looks really good. I'm not seeing any seepage, and the boots are actually in good shape. I'm not seeing any tears on the inner tie rod boots. We'll get the wheels pulled off and take a look at the tie rod ends and the ball joints for the control arms. But I am just pleasantly surprised, guys. This car just continues to amaze me. It was really taken care of. Look at that. It has an auxiliary fan tucked behind the bumper. I didn't know that. I just cannot believe how little this car is leaking. I mean, it's practically bone dry down here. I just can't believe it. BMWs are known to leak, and this thing is just an exception. It's an exceptional car. Wow. I mean, it's old rubber, but they're solid. I'm not seeing any tears or cracks in them. I think they're just old. Hopefully you guys can get a good eye on that. Some people like to swap these out for rigid bushings, but I'm a big believer in keeping the control arm bushing stock. I like to go with the OE replacement. Just makes for a lot better, makes for a better ride. Yeah, those things are solid. I don't even really feel like I need to replace those yet. Here's a look at the passenger. Also, just really tight. Good solid bushings. That's definitely not top priority. Those things are still in decent shape. I'm not too confident crawling around underneath this thing right now, so I'm going to swap out my 3 tons for my big beefy 6-ton jack stands. I'm a lot more comfortable crawling around underneath this thing now. So, like I was saying, guys, this thing is absolutely mint. Gotta look inside the bell housing there. Someone must have forgot to put the cover back on. Surprised a mouse didn't get chewed up inside that thing. So look at the steering linkage and the driver's side. Everything's looking really clean. This car is insane. Might need to refresh these sway bar links. They don't look terrible. Let's bump back here to the transmission. Does this car really have one transmission mount? It really only has one transmission mount. That's surprising. Well, the trans mount actually looks to be in decent shape. We're gonna refresh it because it's old and tired. And check out that flex disc. That flex disc is in good shape too. Someone must have refreshed it not too long ago. And there is no rust down here. Maybe like a little bit on the transmission cross member here, but that's pretty much the bulk of the rust that's on this car. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. So, exhaust, heat shields for the drive shaft, moving our way back. Looks like this must be the fuel filter. One of you guys commenting said this car has 2 fuel pumps. One inside the tank and one external. And if that's the case, this must be the external pump. But everything looks to be in good shape. Probably need to replace those just due to age. And making our way back some more. Getting back to the rear differential. The differential mount looks to be in good shape too. I mean, I'm not surprised at this point. Everything on this car is just in such nice shape that I haven't really been thrown any curveballs yet. Axle seal, yeah, there's a little bit of buildup, but it's not really actively leaking. I'm curious what the fluid level is. Maybe we can pop the plug off it today, check fluid levels. Passenger side looks about the same, maybe a little bit more seepy. It'd be a nice idea to pull the differential out and do a full reseal on it. What else? What else? Shock bushings. Those look to be in good shape. The exhaust. Not really any rust besides the hanger. Looks like we have a missing hanger here. Not sure where that mounts up to, but it seems that the exhaust is stout enough. I don't think we need to add it on. Subframe mounts. Hard to see. I'll have to check them with Prybar, but the rear subframe seems pretty stout. It's pretty small on this car. It's not that big, four bolt style like on the E46. It's just these 2 subframe mounts. That's about it. Probably have to drop the subframe down to get access to this rear control arm. Man, this car is insane. Here's a little bit better look at the rear end. It's me crawling out from underneath it. Rear shock mounts are separating. You can see that separation there. You'll find that on pretty much a lot of BMWs, especially E46s. Anything with these shock mounts in the rear, they're bound to separate. Let's cruise on over to the driver's side. Looks like we got a hole blown out there, but same story. Cracked shock mount, torn shock mount, separated, whatever you want to call it. I think let's pull the wheels and tires off and see what everything else looks like. Before we do that, just one last final look at the undercarriage. Just so clean, guys. Truly amazed by the condition of this car. So passenger side there and driver's side. You know, the rust on the paint isn't. Hey Sage, what are you doing down here? Okay. The rust on the top side of the car Totally different story underneath. And even the pinch seams are in good shape. The passenger side pinch seam up here in the front, not so much. As you can see right here, someone must have done some damage with the floor jack, but it's not terrible. We could totally repair it, get it bent back into shape. I did see a video last night where someone took these stock E30 wheels and they put that widening bottle cap on it. It actually looks pretty sweet. It turns these stock wheels into 3-piece. 2012, so about 10 years. It's a shame too because they're in really nice shape, but they need to get replaced just due to age, due to the dry rotting. As far as the pads and rotors go, this thing's got at least 8 millimeters on it, probably well over 60%. I really don't know if I need to replace the pads and rotors right now. There's not too much rust on the rotor surface. I'm not feeling too big of a lip. It feels decently smooth, not too many grooves in it. You can see a little bit of a cavity there on top for the sway bar bushing, so we'll probably renew those. I'm going to put them on the list. But even surprisingly, the brake lines look in good shape. I've seen a lot newer cars with a lot worse looking brake lines, so I think they may be trustworthy for a little while. We'll see. Now I'm seeing a little bit of cracking there, so we'll probably replace them. Sway bar end links look decent. They feel tight. This car just continues to amaze me. Bump stops are still intact. I'm not seeing any signs of, well, there's a little bit of apparent leakage down here in the strut. You can see maybe a little bit of fluid built up there. It'd be nice just to replace these front struts in general. I've never messed with this front strut design. It looks like it's permanently affixed down there into the knuckle, and so I assume you have to take the strut out and then disassemble it with the coil spring removed. I'm not positive. I'm gonna have to do some more research on how to get these struts refreshed, but everything's looking really good. Might be nice just to replace the control arms altogether and refresh both of those ball joints. Driver's side, same story on that sway bar bushing. We'll need to renew those. Looks like this brake line right here is starting to swell just a little bit right there. So probably a good idea to replace them, and a lot less cobwebs on this strut. I'm not seeing any signs of leaking. But, you know, like any old car, it would be nice to refresh all of the front suspension. No brake hoses to worry about here in the rear end, maybe up there at the subframe, but we have hard lines going all the way to the wheel cylinders, which is nice. So overall, I gotta say, I'm really happy just with the condition of this car. Even down here underneath the rear bumper, it looks really clean. Not seeing any rust issues down here by the bumper mounts. But let's knock these drums off, take a look at what the drum brakes look like. I doubt this drum hold down screw is going to want to come out easy. Looks like it's a 5 mil, but I figure we'll try it. Nope, we'll have to put the impact driver on that thing so we don't strip it out. Now this is a great tool to have. This is an old Kmart brand impact driver, and basically what you do is you just preload it to one side. I believe you preload it left if you want to loosen, and you smack this back end with a hammer, and that drives it forward and causes it to move to that direction. And it's just really good for busting stubborn broken bolts like this loose. I only have a 5mm 1/4 inch Allen socket, so we're going to be using 1/4 inch. I had to adapt down here. But let's see if we can get it to go. There we go. Worked beautifully. Now we got to figure out how to get this drum off. So for this, I'm just going to try to give it some taps. stick a pry bar in here. Wants to go. Hey, goes to show how good of a condition this car is in. Oh, look at that. Those shoes are in great shape. Still got plenty of meat on them. Springs are all intact. There's hardly any lip on the drum. So that's all really good news. These shoes still have plenty of life in them. They haven't delaminated. I'm not seeing any signs of any cracking. So, good stuff. I think I'm going to scuff them up real quick just to kind of freshen them up. And we'll do some adjustment later on when we adjust the brakes. We'll also clean up this hub real quick too. Now, a mask like this is a little bit overkill, but it's what I got. I spent too many years doing brake jobs and coming home with black boogers and wiping out black out of my nose every time I did a brake job. So I'm trying to be a lot more conscious about my health, especially when wrenching, dealing with brake dust, sanding, anything like that, cutting pressure treated wood. So I would advise you guys to try to do the same. I'm trying to have a lot of years left on this planet, and there's a lot of real nasty stuff in these old brake pads, so just trying to be as cautious as I can. Tap that socket in. Okay, and then cock it to the left. First try. Look at that. Beautiful. Just want to check inside these boots, make sure these wheel cylinders aren't leaking, which looks like this one is. If you peel this boot back, see down in there, got some rusty garbage coming out. That means this wheel cylinder is going to need to get replaced. Means these back brakes are not working as well as they should be. So looks like we're doing wheel cylinders in the rear. Let's take a look at the wheel cylinder on this passenger side. Yeah, there's definitely some rust in there. So I'd like to probably flush the brake fluid first, get all this old brake fluid out, and then replace them in the future, and then flush and bleed again. All right. Maybe the big 13/16. Yep. All right, doesn't look too bad. Got a Bosch plug. A Bosch Super. This is a WR9 DC. Doesn't look terrible. That plug was pretty loose. Definitely could have been tighter. Better safe than sorry. Same story, decent shape. Gotta love an old school owner's manual. Look for fuses in the back, 515. Came down here, fuse number 11, main and auxiliary fuel pump. We're gonna pull that so we can do a compression test. Come right over here, number 11, blue 15 amp. Good to go. Other thing I'm going to do here is pull the wire from the ignition coil to the distributor. That way we no longer have any spark and we'll be good to go. No fuel, no spark. Now I get to use my snappy compression gauge set. You don't need a nice expensive one like this. I bought this off the tool truck while I was still at the shop, but I will link a cheaper option for you guys in the description. Just get threaded in hand tight. We connect our gauge. Make sure pressure is reduced to 0. Now the starter is going to be sticky like it was before, but I should be able to get it for 4 revolutions. We'll see what our compression is at. We got 170 psi on cylinder number 1. Looking really good so far. What a healthy engine. 170. Beautiful. 170 across the board. Can't ask for anything better than that. And this engine is 40 years old. Can you believe it? I'm going to say it right now. This has probably got to be one of the most reliable BMW engines from what I've seen. Okay, I'm going to get all these plugs back in and get this thing buttoned back up. Other BMW spark plugs are 25 Newton meters, so I'm just going to go with that. Seems safe enough. Well, I couldn't have asked for better compression test results, so I'm really happy with that. 170 across the board. That's a really healthy engine. No issues that I need to worry about as of right now. Spark plug wires are back in. Ignition coil wire is back on. And we can put our fuel pump fuse back in. All right, now we're going to be checking the differential fluid. Now, I have no idea why there is a plug in this rear differential. If any of you guys can comment and tell me, that would be awesome. I have no idea. It's a 10 millimeter Allen to break this fill loose. And we have some fluid coming out. Let's get a pinky dip in there. It's up to level. And it's actually incredibly clean. Look at that. That looks like honey. That is clear. Gosh, I mean, I was going to service all the fluids in this car, but I don't even really think I need to. Everything is so clean. It's blowing me away. Anyways, that diff fluid is really nice. It's awesome to see. But yeah, you guys comment. Tell me what the hell this thing is here. Now, I realized I didn't get you guys a look at the coolant condition. So let me show you the color before we pressure test it. Pretty good. Dark green, up to level, can't complain. Looks really good. So for the cooling system, I'm using my Snap-on cooling system pressure tester. Again, you don't need Snap-on. I'll link a cheaper alternative for you in the description. The main part is we have to find an adapter that's going to fit on this radiator. So hopefully they still use the same old BMW style cap. No, I think we have a leak. Hey, that feels pretty good. I think this is the one. No, that doesn't want to hold pressure either. So sadly, none of my adapters fit for this radiator cap. I'm going to do some digging online to see if I can find an adapter for my cooling system pressure tester. It would be nice to have, especially if I'm going to be owning classic BMWs like this in the future. I was able to get that orange cap to fit a bit, but pressure was bleeding out of this overflow hose. I tried to cap it off, get it up to 15, 16 PSI, but my cap kept blowing out of this hose. But we're not really seeing any major coolant leaks, or really any coolant leaks for that matter right now. So I'm not too concerned about it. Alright guys, so here's a quick list of everything I've found on the car so far. I like to use 1, 2s, and 3s as far as priority goes. Number 1 being the most important, number 3 being the preventative maintenance item. We have the starter because it's intermittently sticking, distributor reseal due to that vacuum leak we found, heater hose T, it's crusty, that's number 3, all 3 belts due to age, number 2, coolant flush due to age, vacuum line off of the fuel pressure regulator, power steering flush with the new bottle. By the way, there is a filter inside those power steering bottles, so it's always a good idea to replace them when you do a flush. Brake booster hose plus check valve, brake fluid flush, air filter, fuel filters. Looks like there's quite a few. I think I found 3 of them. Intake boot plus whatever vacuum hoses and intake hoses are associated with the intake manifold and the idle air control valve up top. Those look pretty bad. Oil service. Coolant crust that's present at the temperature sensors and lower hose. Probably replace both hoses, reseal all those temp sensors. Front crank seal. Oil pan gasket is seeping. Rear differential reseal plus a service. Sway bar links, rear shock mounts, front struts, front brake lines, complete control arm replacements, both rear wheel cylinders, and spark plugs. That's pretty much what I got so far. Now the list will continue to grow, but this is just a pretty early on list I got. I put it in a Google Drive so I can bring it wherever, and this I think is enough to get us started. The inspection went great. This car is phenomenal. It's an exceptional car. It's incredibly clean, and you know, the rusty paint's kind of growing on me. One of you guys commented and said you like the patina. Now it's not that traditional classic style patina you'll see on a 50s or 60s classic car that's been sitting in the desert its whole life, but it has its own 1984 patina charm to it, which I think is pretty cool. I'm going to compile this list a little bit further and try to group the jobs up together by system. So if we're going to do a coolant flush, we might as well replace both radiator hoses, and we might as well address that crusty heater hose T while we're flushing the coolant and all that good stuff. If we're doing the brake fluid flush, we might as well replace both of those wheel cylinders, maybe do the front brake hoses while we're in there as well. So just kind of stuff like that, group it up by category. That way we're not wasting any fluid or any materials or labor. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Rob's Weekend Garage, Grant Schmidt, and Ryan M. for jumping into my YouTube membership program. I really appreciate your support, guys. It means the absolute world to me, so thanks for supporting me on my journey. By the time this video comes out, we should be at 10,000 subscribers, and it's just blowing my mind that we got here that fast. I read and reply to every single comment that you guys leave on YouTube videos. So if you have a question, if you just want to chop it up or just say hi, please feel free to comment down below. I'd love to get to know you guys more. I hope you enjoyed, or I hope you learned something new. And as always, folks, I will see you on my next day off. Cheers.